So this week we're looking at the conditional, or conditional statements. The conditional, very tricky. Let's think of it in terms of conditional statements. What's the classic form? Using any one of our variables. I guess they're not variables or constants, just symbolic representations of propositions. Let's stick with. There is a conditional statement. What are P and Q? P and Q are both propositions. If P, then Q. One of the things that is tricky, I think, about just thinking about basically what a conditional statement is that, yes, I think our author is right when she says that P and Q are both propositions. They are. But one of the things to keep in mind when you're thinking about a conditional statement is that a conditional statement is itself a proposition, and that it only says one thing. A conditional statement contains two propositions, but it itself is only one. Only one thing. When we say if P then Q, we are only asserting one single thing, and that is this. If P is true, then Q is true. And I think that that's a good thing to keep in mind. One of the things that our author says in trying to get a handle for us on these if-then statements is the variety in ordinary speech, the variety of different meanings of those statements. I think it's on, well, I don't know. That sometimes the if statement can be, if-then statement can be interpreted causally. That P somehow causes Q, and that's fine. But in terms of logic, I think that whenever you see a conditional of the form if P then Q, then it may help to say to yourself, well, what that means that if P is true, then Q is true, or even if P is true, then Q must be true as well. That's sort of what I tell myself. That is that strictly in logic, or strictly in logical terms, what is being asserted by if P then Q is the truth of one is tied to the truth of the other. And all that's being said there in if P then Q is that if P is true, then Q must be true as well. And I think that that'll serve you well. I mean, yes, if-then statements in ordinary speech have a whole variety of different meanings. But in logic, they really only have one. And it has to do with truth and falsity. And again, what is being stated is one thing, a connection between two statements. We're not stating these two propositions as being true. What we're stating is that a connection between them is true. That if P is true, then Q must be true as well. Now, one of the things that we're not saying, if we say if P, then Q, we are not saying that P is true, and we are not saying that Q is true. That is, yes, we have two propositions here. Let's make it into a real proposition. If saying this is true, but it's an if-then. What we're saying here, we're not saying that the sun is down, and we're not saying that it is dark. What we're saying is exactly what is there. That we're saying that if the sun is down, or if it is true that the sun is down, then it is also true that it is dark. That is, one thing is being said here in a conditional statement, and that is a certain connection between two statements or two propositions. Now, where are this is a notoriously difficult thing, the conditional, to sort of get straight. And the self-assessment this week is just very basic questions that I think cover most of the potential problems on this elementary level that we're working on with logic. And I don't mean that as any kind of criticism of the course. I mean, elementary things in logic are incredibly important. But I try to cover in the self-assessment most of, in my experience, what the trouble spots are. Let's think about this statement. If P then Q is our sentence, or a sentence schema, I guess, and then if the sun is down, then it is dark, is filling those things in, right? P is the sun is down, Q is it is dark, right? That's what fills in the if ... then ... right? Okay, if P then Q, let's think about it. Now, remember, neither P nor Q is being asserted here. If I say if the sun is down, then it is dark, I am not asserting that the sun is down. I am not asserting that it is dark. What I'm asserting is if the sun is down, then it is dark. Okay. So the important thing to keep in mind is that either one of those, or both of those statements or propositions, P and Q, they're capable of being true or false, right? Because they are propositions or they are statements. And that's when things get tricky. So if P then Q, right, let's go back to our basic thing. If P then Q, all right? If I say Q, which is just shorthand for asserting, we'll start with P. If I say P, which is just shorthand for asserting P is true, then what follows? Think about it. Yes. Or I could say so Q, or therefore Q. That's the basic meaning of it, right? The basic meaning of it, if P is true, then Q must be true as well. Well, P is true, so Q is true as well. Okay, that seems to me the most basic, almost self-evident meaning of the conditional. P is our antecedent. If the antecedent is true, then the consequent is true as well. P is the antecedent, the thing that comes before. Q is the consequent, the thing that comes after. So if we look back up at our actual sentence here, if the sun is down, then it is dark. The sun is down is our antecedent. It is dark is our consequent. Okay, so if P then Q, or if P is true, then Q is true. P is true, so Q is true as well. That is, in the conditional, if the antecedent is true, then the consequent must be true. That seems to be fairly clear, really clear, actually. Okay. Let's think about some other possibilities. Again, starting with our conditional, if P, then Q. Say that P is not true. In logical shorthand, not P. Then what can we infer? What does that imply? If P, then Q, or if P is true, then Q is true. Not P, or P is not true. So what can we then conclude about Q? If P is true, then Q is true. Think about it. What can we conclude? The answer is nothing. Right. We know that if P is true, then Q is true as well, but there's nothing in the conditional that says that P must be Q in, excuse me, that P must be true in order for Q to be true. So we accept our conditional as being true, if P then Q. We accept that P is not true. What follows then about Q? Nothing. Why? And we'll follow this up in the next video, because P is a sufficient but not necessary condition for Q.